Today is March 17, 2026, and our dear friend Alastair Crooke is here with us. Welcome back, Alastair.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to join you.
Let me start with the breaking news we've learned from the Israelis, from the officials, the defense minister of Israel, that they have assassinated the head of National Security Council of Iran, Ali Larijani. And recently, there are a lot of rumors about what is happening with Benjamin Netanyahu, some sort of fake AI and these sort of. But when it comes to the assassination of people like Ali Larijani, which I would consider him as not a radical, he's a somehow reformist type of, person. He's not that much to the right, is in the center somehow. And with what's going on in Israel as well, in the Israeli media, what is your understanding of this psychological somehow war between the two, Israel and Iran?
Well, you're right to point out. I mean, I've seen the claims that he has been assassinated. I don't know if they're true. They haven't been, as far as I know, yet been confirmed in Iran. But possibly it is true. I mean, that's the vibe that I get, that we ought to be expecting that is to be the case. And this is a track that Israel has been down for a long, long time. You remember, I mean, this is assassinations and killings and decapitations have been their basic modus operandi. And often it ends up, worse. I remember, well, I don't remember the exact times, but you will recall that the previous head of Hezbollah was Musawi, and that the Israelis were determined to kill him and to kill others of the leadership in what they saw as the clerical leaders in Hezbollah. And what did they end up with? They ended up with Nasrallah, a harder line person. And I think what you say about Ali Larijani is quite true. Larijani is very much a very intelligent, intellectual, thoughtful person. He's not by any means an extremist, if you like, shall I say, on the more militant wing, the more determined. He's actually much more centrist, shall we say. And so we don't know who will replace him. There's talk that it might be Kalibaf. I don't know if it will be Kalibaf because there was a difference between these two appointments. Larijani was head of the whole Supreme National Security Council. So he was dealing not only with, I mean, there was the military aspect of it, which has now been, if you like, taken out of the main Security Council function and has been left with military experts under the command of Kalibaf. And Kalibaf has been managing the military side of it, the operational side of the war, in my understanding, whereas Larijani has to deal, with the diplomatic side, with relations with India, with, all of these other aspects of it. So will they want to take Kalibaf out of his role, which he's played, by all accounts, has been very effective in it for that? Well, maybe. I mean, we can't say. But as I say, there are always unexpected consequences of these things. Israel always assumes, that killing people who they think are not in pro-Israeli is a sort of a necessary function. But it often, if you like, is counterproductive even for their interest, let alone the interests of many others. But I just have to say, this whole thing of just killing and killing, all are deemed, that anyone who's deemed to be not pro-Israeli should be killed, is terrible. I mean, and Trump has been starting to say these sort of things too. I mean, I find it it's really quite disgusting. And he said journalists who don't support Israel, they should be prosecuted as treason under the Treason Act. Treason Act has a death penalty. I mean, are they really going to say that they're going to kill people in America that don't support Israel or completely in this war? Because there's a lot of Americans who don't support Israel fully in this war, besides some journalists. But we've got, this has been, the exterminate or be exterminated thinking that comes out of Israel. You have to exterminate so that you don't get exterminated. And of course, that's never been the calculus, either for Iran or Hezbollah too, although Trump claims that, Hezbollah and others have said that their aim is to destroy the the Hebraic element of the land there. It's never been that. It has been to try and force them to give up the idea of special rights for one population group over other population groups with whom they share the same territory. That's quite a different prospect. And that is what Hassan Nasrallah said at the time. It was about exhausting and pushing Israel to a desperation where they would re-examine Zionism and find that it was a wrong path to try and establish special rights, administrative security, financial rights for one population group in territory occupied by other peoples.
Yeah. How do you see the situation around Netanyahu? What is your understanding of the current situation? The way that we haven't seen Netanyahu in the last two security briefings in Israel. How can we understand that?
Well, we can't. I mean, we just don't know. I mean, there's been a sort of a tsunami of obviously AI videos being put out. But are they deliberately putting out AI videos to confuse the situation? Or are they AI videos that are put out to cover up a reality that they don't want to share with the world? We don't know that. And it's not much point in trying to second guess it. We'll know in due course. But for now, you can look through those videos and you can come to some sort of conclusion, but it may be wrong. But the other thing that is the case is we've noticed in psychological terms, a huge shift taking place just recently in the last few days in Israel. A big shift that is prevalent, particularly in the Hebrew press, where serious figures are saying, it's time for Trump to call time out and get out of this war. It's over. It's not leading to a success. I mean, many people, serious military figures or political figures writing in the Hebrew press there is a complete change in tone that has taken place. And if you look at in the last few days at the Hebrew press, what is quite striking is the sort of sense that, everyone is just writing about banalities, about some arcane part of the conflict that's going on between the various parties, about the upcoming elections in Israel or something, who's saying this or who's that. I mean, and not the war, and not saying anything about Iran. So why is that? I don't know. I'm not sure what it is, but it looks as if something quite important has struck Israel, because it's everywhere across the Hebrew press, a sort of sense that something has turned. I can't say how it's turned or what, but I think it's important. And we'll probably have to wait to find out what that is. But we've also even seen some signs of, anxiety and crisis in Washington, of people saying the security briefing was awful. I mean, coming out of, the classified security briefings in Washington and saying, "Whoa, this was, terrible." They don't say what was terrible, but there is a change in psychology, and I think it's important, really, also to say, and I'm saying it to you who know it. So I mean, it's really for the audience, is that there's a change in psychology, I believe, in Iran too, that people have come together. I mean, in a way that hasn't existed since the revolution. I mean, as a people have come together. I mean, they are absolutely solid and forthright, going onto the street. People who might have been in the opposition camp have now switched completely. I mean, there's no opposition of the sort that Trump conjures up and thinks that is going to sort of somehow take control of the country. There is a sort of resilience and a sort of steadfastness in people. You see it, something happens, an explosion goes off when there are crowds on the street, and people don't move. They just stay there. And even if, someone in the crowd is killed, people just stay. Ramadan, after iftar, after the feast, they're out on the streets. So I think there is that actually the bombing and the loss of life, civilian life, has actually stiffened the opposition to the United States and Israel in Iran, and has created a sort of a spirit of resistance, a spirit, I mean, which is also, something to do with, the whole sort of essence of what it is to be Iranian and what it is to be part of this experiment. And so I think that's another important element. And I think psychology is also changing in the United States in quite a profound way too. We have to sort of try and look what it is. It's not entirely clear, but in some quarters, I mean, there's a touch of panic in the air. I mean, panic not just about the war, but about the economy and about midterm elections. And there's also, an issue which is coming to the fore of why are we in this war? It's not just about, can I have a pretext? What's your pretext for having launched the war? Whether it was the nuclear program or whether it was some other aspect that, Iran threatened Israel, which it didn't. Iran threatened America, which it didn't. But there is something, because you keep getting the feeling that, why did Trump go into something so patently wrong? I mean, so patently stupid to get into this war when, normally he has quite good political instincts. And, it's leaving many Americans, I believe, and you can hear them saying this, with a sense that there's something unseen in this equation, something, a power structure, something that is able to enforce and entrap people into behavior that they might not otherwise be taking. And so that sort of sense that Americans have got now to look at themselves and say, what exactly is the structure? What does it uh, amount to, and who's controlling it? Because it's invisible for Americans to be able to see you. It's obvious that it's there, and obvious that it has a huge power behind it. But the question of who is actually controlling the American destiny is now becoming an issue, something important in America. And so this is something. So, and then we have, of course, the midterms, and the midterms are causing a real panic in the Republican Party. I mean, they've been having a meeting at the Doral Club, where a golf club owned by Trump in Florida, looking at it. And I heard a Republican say, "Listen, most of the people at this meeting knew that as things stand, they're not going to make it. I mean, the majority are not going to get through this midterms. They're going to drown, or if they can just sort of stay afloat long enough till 28 elections, they hope that they might be up there. But there's a real sense of anxiety, and they feel they've completely lost their MAGA base. So this is another element of the war, apart from the one about the economic situation. Because, I mean, part of this asymmetrical war that Iran is deploying, asymmetrical I'm talking here about on the military front, has always been an asymmetrical war, but it's also a war on logistics, and it's a war on the economic situation. And it seems to me that is really spooking people, that they cannot, that effectively Iran is controlling passage through Hormuz. For now, it is allowing certain ships through. The Chinese ships are passing through. Indian, and I believe a Pakistani ship also has passed through. But others, the vast majority, are not able to pass through. And that is creating a great deal of concern about inflation in the West and economic slowdown, perhaps even recession or worse. And that is, I mean, going to play out in a big way. This is going to play out in a big way in the midterm elections. And people are talking about gasoline prices, gas prices, as they call it, in California at $8 a gallon, and that's they consider that outrageous. Americans are very affected, more affected than anyone else, I think, about the price of whatever you want to call it, petrol, gasoline. This really does affect politics, not just people's pockets, but it is a sort of litmus for politics. High gasoline prices is a vote against the incumbent government. I mean, it's this sort of mechanical. Is that, I think, in a certain way. These are some of the elements, and they hope that China would switch, that China would, because of the closure of Hormuz, China would join in a process to open it. But China, I think they've miscalculated on China's situation. 40% of the oil that goes through Hormuz has been to China. Yet, the reality is, because China is such a big consumer of energy, that's only less than 5% of its total. In other words, it's not existential for China, and in any case, it filled its strategic reserve before the war. It actually, unlike America, made some strategic precautions. It filled its reserves, and its tankers are passing through the Hormuz. And so, and for China, I mean, so this is not, such a problem. Of course, they depend on this Iranian oil, but it's flowing, and it'll probably continue to flow during this period. And at the same time, they are just exporting, to Europe, to Asia. Their exports are soaring, and they are becoming less and less dependent on the American market. Their exports, I think, in the last quarter went up something like nearly 20%, and their exports to America have been declining because China is reorientating, and this has huge consequences because the whole economy is now, if you like, pivoting to China because of its exports and because of its competitiveness. It's competitive as in a way that neither anyone in the West, either Europe or America, can compete with it. It's got price deflation in manufactured goods, and we have price inflation. So China is not a threat from what's happening in Hormuz, as it seems, Besant and Trump seem to believe it is at risk. On the contrary, it's doing very well out of this period, and it is not likely to sort of feel any need to change the situation on the ground, because, and that's perhaps something we back to later, because this is a big geopolitical shift, geostrategic shift that is taking place. I just mentioned China, of course, Russia, and what Iran is doing by taking control of these choke points and the seaways of the Persian Gulf, through which most of the energy travels. Some 40% total energy, I think, travels through these on these lanes. They are actually changing the geopolitical situation of Gulf states, but also other states, whether it is Japan, whether it is Taiwan, whether it is South Korea, all of whom are much, much more dependent on oil, and India and Pakistan. Now, Iran, for now, has been allowing Indian to run its tankers, even though, Modi went and sort of gave his blessings to Israel in an extraordinary show of subordination to Israel just before the war began. However, Iran is still allowing India. I think it's a political decision to try and, not to capitalize on India's bad judgment, but to try and bring it back into the BRICS fold, from which it was quite evidently, seemed to be moving in the other direction, not formally, but in the same sort of political.
Yesterday, Donald Trump said that he was totally surprised by Iranian attacks on American bases on these Arab states, Persian Gulf Arab states. And he was even asking, the people around him, some of the people in his administration, he was mentioning, we were all surprised by these attacks and the way Iran responded. On the other hand, he said something else. He's surprised with the United Kingdom, with the British Prime Minister, that he's not willing to participate in this, sort of coalition that he's trying to make to go against Iranian army and IRGC to open up the Strait of Hormuz. And it's not just about the United Kingdom. You see different voices coming out of the European countries. For example, Merz said that this is not a war of NATO, and we cannot. And the defense minister of Germany said there is nothing else, nothing of a nature of being a game changer to on the part of Europeans to help the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. That's why they don't see a viable choice for the Europeans to be part of that. And is he really surprised? Because these are really so much common things that we were talking about for more than a year, I would argue, since the war is happening, since last war, 12-day war in June 2025. We were talking about how Iran would react and how devastating that could be for the whole region. And why is it so surprising for the Trump administration and Donald Trump himself?
I think because they're ideologically captive. And when you're ideologically captivated, you don't look in the mirror and you don't see anything other than your own reflection in it. And so I think this is what's happened. As I say, the whole purpose of this period, really from the late 70s, seems to have been, there is some power structure, some which is not easy to see or exactly what their purpose is or what their interest in. But we've had, after the Iranian Revolution, the coup d'etat in 56, and then we've had Libya, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. All of these really sort of connected, if there's a theme, all of these connected to what was called the war on terror. And, and how amazing has been this ability for propaganda, so that you hear quite sensible people. Someone like Tucker Carlson can still describe Iran as a terrorist state, which is just, outrageous. But how in a way it's so unlike him, because he understands this sort of, the history that has been going on, which seems to be, not in the American interest. I mean, clearly Iraq was not. Afghanistan was not. All of these things. Was Libya in the American interest? Well, I suppose they stole the gold. But all of these things. Is Syria in the American interest? Really? I mean, so what is behind it? And I think, as I say, this is a question coming up, but they're not allowing it to be discussed. And this is what is quite clear in America, that anyone who wants to raise the question of, why is it America's interest to be engaged in this, is either attacked verbally or in other ways, criticized for taking a position which is sort of described as being un-American or hostile to the interests. With Europe, I think, they've been closer to the consequences of these. So you mentioned Starmer, but look at, one of his predecessors, Blair. He's hounded wherever he goes. He can't really come. He has a wonderful business of making millions around the Middle East and so on. But at home, he's hounded as a war criminal for his part in the war on Iraq. I mean, it's destroyed him. I mean, he may be a celebrity in Washington. He isn't in Britain. On the contrary. So, so Starmer has seen that and understood it. And anyway, Starmer is besotted with Zelensky. I mean, Zelensky's going to be in London again today, and sort of asking for money and support because, he feels that what's happening with the conflict with Iran has taken people's attention away from where it should be, him, on him, etc. So yes, you're right. I think people, the sort of undefined, the hidden element of ideology in this means that they're not able to look at themselves as others would look on them and see themselves clearly in the mirror. They see themselves as fighting a war for Western civilization against the barbarians at the gate. But, this is such an Orientalist type of construct. It's just doesn't relate to reality. It's just quite divorced from reality. I can't hear.
What we see in the West Asia is the confrontation or we can say three strategies: the strategy of Iran, the strategy of the United States, and the strategy of Israel. Iran doesn't seem to have a strategy of decapitation and, assassinating people in Israel. They're going after the strategic points, military bases, and this, decision maker centers in Israel or in the Persian Gulf, and CIA headquarters in the Persian Gulf. And then on the other hand, you see the United States and Israel having some sort of division when it comes to their strategy. The United States wants some sort of regime change, the same that it happened in Venezuela. Donald Trump is obviously, he's talking about it. He wants someone in Iran who's in Iran to, to drive, to run the country the way that Venezuela is, the way that it's happening in Venezuela. On the other hand, you see the state of Israel, or Benjamin Netanyahu and his administration, they want to destroy Iran. They don't care about who's going to come after or who's going to lead the country. They want to destroy Iran and break it as much as possible. And
exactly.
What is your understanding of what is happening in terms of the strategies of any of these players? Iranian player, American player, and Israeli player.
I think as you say, the Iranian objectives seem to me to be personally quite clear. The most important objective is to end this process. I think Kalibaf said it, of conflict, and then there is a negotiation, then it's back to war, then it's back to another period of truce, then it's back to war again, which has been debilitating and sapping, if you like, particularly the well-being of ordinary Iranians, not the elites, but the ordinary Iranians, because it just goes, the attrition on Iran has been ongoing for 47 years or something like that. So the aim is to make it impossible for anyone to contemplate another war with Iran after this. This one should be sufficiently persuasive that there will not be another follow-up war, that there won't be a period and then 3 years later it'll be back to another conflict and Israel will be threatening it and US threatening Iran again. So it has to be a war that achieves that objective. I think that is one thing, and connected with that is obviously that the war can only end, therefore, with a complete alleviation of the sanctions, the return of frozen assets to Iran, plus the understanding that, this is it. This is the last war in this context. And after that, Iran will be free to pursue its own destiny. I think there are some subsidiary objectives of Iran. the subsidiary objectives are to remove the hostile forces of the United States bases out of the region completely, in a way in which they cannot come back. I mean, the destruction of their military infrastructure is so great that look at these things like the radars that have been destroyed in Al-Udeid base. I mean, was more than $1 billion of cost. Now, there have been 5, I think, of different, they're not all the same cost, but there be at least 5 of these radars. But the point of that is not just the cost, but the Americans say it would take 5 to 8 years to replace it because of the problem they have with supply lines and rare earths, all the things they need from China to do that. So, I think that is the aim, is to do that. And I think the secondary aim is to put Iran in charge of the Persian Gulf security architecture and of the architecture for or the corridors for both supplying energy and for the passage of energy. And if that is achieved, then of course, I think it implies that there will be a complete change in political posture of Gulf states. If you take something like UAE, it is wholly dependent on Hormuz. Well, there is Faish port just near to Oman, but Iran has attacked a vessel that was trying to load in Faraja before. And all their food comes through Hormuz. So it's very hard, excuse me, it's very hard for them to persist in this line that they've had of hostility to Iran. So there would be a change, quite an important strategic change there.
Alastair, do you want to take a sip of water? I think that would help. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I have any.
You can.
Okay. Better. Thank you. Sorry.
No. And Alastair, you've been mentioning the strategy of these countries who are, they have their agenda, the military agenda, intelligence agenda. But so far, how successful, for example, the operation, the way that Iran is, in my opinion, Iran's agenda is to survive the attacks from Israel and the United States. And how capable are they in surviving and attacking and firing back at the United States? Because the main agenda right now is the United States cannot be in the Persian Gulf. They want all these bases being removed. They cannot remove the CIA headquarters, but they can physically remove these radar systems and these things that are important for the air defense system of Israel. On the other hand, they are asking, as you've mentioned, about sanctions. They don't want, they have a bargaining chip right now with Israel for Hormuz. And how this war is, in your opinion, is changing from one level to another one?
Well, it's because I think we think of the war in sort of classical terms, Western terms, of massive military the application of military force, bombing particularly, or firing cruise missiles into Iran, supposedly either to sort of change the sentiment of Iranians or to damage their structures. But if you remember, this hasn't worked. You know, with the bombing of Belgrade in 1999, I mean, they told Clinton this would be a bombing process that would last for 3 or 4 days and would be done. It lasts for 3 months. It involved 1,000 aircraft. It involved 1,000 aircraft. I think there were something like 38,000 separate strikes during that period. And what did it achieve? It didn't destroy the Serbian army. It didn't destroy, it destroyed a few tanks, but it didn't change the calculus. They say, you know, the government fell. Actually, the government fell later for different reasons, but it was actually the same position they could have had at the outset of the war that was offered to them at the end of the war. So, you know, this, you know, there is this huge illusion, not shared by many, by a lot of senior military figures in Washington, in the Pentagon, who say, you know, bombing has been, you know, the stand-to resort, the sort of automatic resort of the West during this period, but it's never brought about the objectives that they looked for from it. So Iran, I mean, you know, from 2003, from the first Iraq war, saw what happened in Baghdad, shock and awe by America, massive bombing, the destruction of the, you know, centralized command of Saddam Hussein, saw that, and they decided, well, what do we do about that? Because, you know, it's not possible to build an air force that can, you know, run counter to the American air power at all. We can't manage that. We can't manage, you know, to fight a naval war on, you know, typical Western terms, you know, battleships battling it out and aircraft carriers and things. So they did the obvious, and they said, so what we want to do is, I mean, they have air largely as superior. They don't have air dominance, I think, now. They have perhaps some superiority in some parts of Iran, but not overall. And so the Iranian decision, as I understand it, was to, you know, so they said, well, you know, we don't have an air force. We're not going to try for a sort of peer air force. So we are going to save our infrastructure from the Air Force by burying it. And it's all going to go down underground. I mean, even airports underground, missile tunnels 90 meters underground, away from the ability to bomb them, hidden. And then as part of the process of dispersal of command, all of these were spread right across Iran, country the size of Western Europe. Deep silos, all autonomously, operated autonomously with instructions that they could continue even if the central command was decapitated, as it was in Baghdad in 2003, that they could continue. It would be like a machine. Once you've clicked the switch, it would just go on, because each of these commanders had prearranged, if you like, authority to act on their own initiative according to their instructions that they were given before the war. I saw this taking place, by the way, when I was in Lebanon in 2006. And this was sort of trialed for the first time by Hezbollah. And each of the various areas, army, units, if you like, had its instructions that were given to it, and that those instructions would carry on even if there was a complete breakdown in communications and the leadership. And they cooperated with the section next to them or behind them or alongside them, but not back to they didn't ask, Beirut for instructions, because they knew what they were supposed to do if Beirut was flattened. And so this was very effective. And I remember, everyone said, oh, well, the biggest air force in the region, the most modern air force they have. Well, they used up their targets in about, I think they thought their targeting would go on, but they'd run out after about a week. The targets were all supposedly hit, the targets. And there was Hezbollah still firing missiles, still fighting on. And when their targeting bank expired, then they started hitting houses and civilians. They had to they had to go on targeting even if they had no, military targets to hit. And so a lot of it was just striking at dummies and decoys that were put out by Hezbollah on the ground to look like launchers. They could remove a launcher in less than a minute and hide it underground. And so, and everyone said, oh, well, the West is, Hezbollah is being defeated, Israel is winning, it's winning. But after 33 days, then actually it was Israel who asked for a ceasefire and said, we have to stop this. Hezbollah won, and it's still there, and it's now proving to be, it is, really hammering northern Israel with rockets and with attacks. And they've changed them, they've also gone asymmetrical. No one knows who the leadership of the military wing is, who's the commander. They don't use communications or cell phones or anything like that now after the pager thing. And Israel itself says we have no window into Hezbollah now at all. And they go back to the old tactics of attack and then disappear. So there's an attack, Israel suffers casualties, and then they vanish. They're not there for the Air Force to come in and, smash everything. They've gone. So it is, so we have asymmetrical war taking place, and the Houthis may join it. And we have it in Iraq with the Hashad, who are attacking, particularly sort of in Erbil and that area where America has a very strong position. And look what's happened to the Green Zone, where the Americans have had to evacuate their, I think it's either the biggest or the second biggest embassy that they have in the region. So we're in an asymmetrical war, and therefore it's impossible to do a sort of balance sheet that means anything. Oh yes, America and Israel have fired this many cruise missiles at Iran. But what is the effect? Has it destroyed the command system? No, because of the Mosaic doctrine, which has been to diffuse and disseminate the command system across many, many different authorities, with the people having their own missile structures, their own weapons, and the authority to use them as they see fit on the death or the assassination of a supreme leader. And that's what happened when the supreme leader was killed on that Saturday morning. Within an hour, the whole structure had started and was starting to attack American bases in the Gulf. So this is a different war, and Westerners find it very hard to comprehend. They're so used to, shock and awe, big bombing, quick in and out, short operations, quickly finished, and that's it.
Whenever Donald Trump is asked when he's going to put an end to the war, he says, whenever I decide I can end the war. But there is a new article in Political, Alastair. It says that Trump's Trump allies fear Iran is slipping beyond the president's control. They're saying that Iranians hold the cards now, and it doesn't particularly matter what Donald Trump is feeling about the conflict, because it's not in his hand to put an end to the conflict. On the other hand, you've mentioned a symmetric strategy on the part of Iranians that somehow changed the terms of the engagement so far. And how do you see the escalation in that direction? Because somehow in the United States, in Israel, many people are arguing maybe ground forces would bring some sort of change to the whole battlefield.
Oh, I think most of this is nonsense. I mean, again, in the asymmetrical warfare, Iran, I mean, it has a small navy, but it's not got frigates and battleships and things like this, because these things are vulnerable and easy. I mean, that's why, the carrier groups are stood off nearly 1,000 kilometers from Iran, because they know just how vulnerable they are. They don't get closer to Iran. But what we see is, Iran's, if you like, control over the Hormuz is affected by a number of things that they have. First of all, basic fire control, not from the coastal areas, but from behind the coastal areas, artillery control. But then there are, if you like, undersea drones that are maneuverable, directional undersea drones, like sort of really fast torpedoes that move through water extremely quickly. And then there are surface drones, these speedboats. And I think Iran has hundreds of these speedboats, which have explosives in them and can be directed, and they can zigzag around as they approach a vessel. And we've seen the effect of that on an American tanker, where it erupted into fire. And so, what are you going to do? I mean, if you try and put a sort of an American or a European frigate to accompany these, they're completely vulnerable to a little speedboat suddenly hitting them, full of explosives, and they will be destroyed. What's the answer to that? There's no very easy answer to these undersea. We haven't seen those used yet, but they're there. So there's the undersea then. And then, the midpoint, and Iran is making shipping pass by the midpoint, not the other parts of it, by those islands, is something like 21 kilometers. So, this is within a field of fire. Putting boots on the ground, I mean, this is absurd. I mean, the extent, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the extent of the Iranian coastline along to the Hormuz and into the Gulf is something like 2,000 kilometers.
Right.
So, you're going to send 2,500 troops there. That means one soldier for every kilometer, effectively. I mean, you'd need hugely increased forces for that. I don't think, I mean, I know it's being talked about, and the other point is, of course, it would be a very red line for the base of Trump's supporters. I mean, they don't like the fact that, having promised there would be no new Middle East wars, that's what they've got. But once you say, and boots on the ground, for the base, this is red line. if Trump wants to lose both the House and the Senate and end up impeached, I mean, this is the way to go about it, I think, by putting boots on the ground. And also, you can't, I mean, again, people don't look at it. These, I mean, Delta Force or the Marines in this case, I mean, you put them down into Iran, I mean, they wouldn't know what to do. They wouldn't know who's friendly, who isn't, and they wouldn't know the circumstances. They've never fought in these sort of very different circumstances. I mean, I would think, it would just be another point of leverage for Iran in this case. It certainly wouldn't open it. So as the Hormuz stands not blocked, but gated, if you like, selectively gated, the economic situation is going to worsen. I wouldn't be at all surprised if the Houthis start interfering with tankers trying to load up at the Saudi post in the Red Sea, which would, I think, has an annual throughput of about 5 million barrels a day, if that. But I don't know that, I don't think the Houthis, they haven't come into it, but I think they're just waiting for the right moment, just as we saw with Hezbollah. So there's no easy way out of this. But of course, the demands which I said, the demands for an end to sanctions, and incidentally, one of, I believe, Iranian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure one of the Iranian demands would be the removal of IDF forces from Gaza and from the Palestinian area. There would be that as well. I mean, America, I mean, I heard an American said, what is unacceptable? I mean, we're used to winning. I mean, how can we not win? And so I can't see that, the possibility of getting out of it is going to be really within the realm of practical politics in the US at the moment.
Before wrapping up, Alastair, when desperation goes that high, many people would argue Israel may use nuclear weapons against Iran. And Iran, on the other hand, we have the changes in the leadership of Iran after the assassination of the supreme leader. And Iran may revise, its policy toward nuclear weapons to have some sort of deterrence. How do you see, is Israel going that far to use tactical, let's put it, the tactical nuclear bombs or a nuclear bomb against Iran? And how is that going to play out for Israel and the United States?
I mean, it's possible. Israel does have tactical nuclear weapons, as Iran is very much aware. They're probably sitting in one of the 5 submarines that Israel possessed. It was given to them by the Germans. It's possible, and I'm sure that has come into the Iranian calculation. There is also Dimona, and the other thing we haven't seen, but I'm convinced is we haven't seen the range, because all of these weapons that Iran has been using have been carefully meted out. They've been husbanded. We haven't seen the most powerful weapons yet. And we don't know what they are. But I'm pretty sure Iran has other weapons that we haven't seen. And we've understood, in a way, from Russia, I'm not making exact comparison, but the Oreshnik missile of Russia, I mean, in some respects, surpassed, the usefulness of, say, a nuclear weapon. We are in a new era, it has the advantage of being very precise and not creating huge amounts of collateral or damaging the whole environment. So the Eroshnik was, is sort of a shift in the whole military structure that the Russians have. I don't know what Iran has. They haven't. I say they've been husbanding. They have a plan, push America out of its Gulf bases. They have a second plan, another phase, destroy the radars, blind America and US, resort to decoys and other forms to confuse the Americans. I haven't seen any real sign that the Americans or Israelis, they talk about, mobile launches, but I haven't seen, and it would be very difficult to think. I don't think they even know where the deeply buried missile silos are located. And they're across, this huge terrain, which is mountainous and has big forests. And I mean, it's looking for needles in haystacks, but I don't see that they've achieved that. So I don't know what would be the answer to your question, but let's hope we don't have to, find out.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alastair, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
No, it was mine, not yours. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Alastair.